Welcome to Power Women of the Trades podcast. This show is all about breaking barriers and changing the game. Our guests will feature some of today's most successful female entrepreneurs and other advocates of our industry as well. Because if there's one thing we know for sure, female-led entrepreneurship drives change on multiple levels. We want to empower women in the trade industry like you so you can maximize your potential, stay balanced, achieve long-term success, and claim ownership over your life. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, it's Leslie and Cassie here with Power Women of the Trades podcast, and we're so excited about our next guest. We have Elaine Damschen of Mainstream Electric Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing out of Washington. And Elaine is a Nexstar member with us, and I got introduced to her during one of the ladies' Moxie hours, and she just really had an incredible story. She's just so genuine and sincere, and I'd love for you to just kind of start out from the beginning. Like you said, you started from scratch with your husband.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh my goodness. Gosh, if I go back in time, my husband Todd was in the Air Force and he troubleshot the radar on the Wild Weasel fighter jet. And when it was time for him to get out of the Air Force, someone said to Todd, "Hey, you should become an electrician." And Todd and I had 6-month-old baby boys, and Todd came home from work that day and he said, "Elaine, I just quit my job. I am going to become an apprentice electrician for $6 an hour, and you have to trust me on this." And keep in mind, my first career was a school teacher, and I taught half-time because I was a mom of twin boys, and I only made $10,000 that year. So we went from a 2-income home to $6 an hour and my income of $10,000 that year. And normally I would have completely freaked out, but he had such sincerity and emotion behind that I trusted him. And fast forward, he did 4 years of trade school in Idaho, got his journeyman's license, and started Mainstream. Well, my dad was a framer actually while I was growing up, and I saw how hard he worked out in the weather. And I kept telling myself, I am never going to marry a contractor because I didn't want to see my husband going through that. So keep in mind, I had that mental story in my head. And after Todd running Mainstream 2 years by himself, taking calls, doing book work, doing the work, only getting a few hours of sleep a night, Todd did humbly ask me to join the company because Todd actually was diagnosed with MS. And at the time I felt like, gosh, I'm a healthy woman. I'm staying home with my children, and I had to do it. So I call my first days of Mainstream as the enslaved wife, because keep in mind, I had this narrative that I'm not going to marry a contractor. And now, dang it, God wants me to come in and do the thing. And so I did. So that's how Mainstream got started. And that's how I got involved with Mainstream.
And how long ago was that?
23 years ago.
Wow, 23. So 23 years, I just think about in my personal business, we're about 9 years old. Leslie, about 4 years. So 23 seems like that I already feel like I've lived 12 lifetimes in the 9 years. So I bet you have just years of stories of those years and wisdom. So 23 years ago you came on, and were you just electric then? I'm going to assume it took a little bit to start adding more verticals. And so what did that 3 years ago would be 2000. So,
and was it new construction? Was it service? What kind of work was it at the time? And what are you doing now?
So when we first started, we did what most contractors do. We did it all. And it was Mainstream Electric. So we did new construction, commercial, industrial, and service as well. And after 3 or 4 years of doing that, we came to realize it was difficult to stand out in the contract world unless it was solely based on price, regardless of what kind of customer service experience we provided. And we actually got a postcard in the mail from a different Infinity group. And Todd and I went to one of those profit days, and where we learned about service work and really bringing our niche bringing it narrow so we can have expertise in that. And so at that time, we joined the Infinity Group. And about 5 years into business, we were finally able to share with contractors when they called and asked to bid on jobs that we were no longer doing new construction. So, and then keep in mind, fast forward, probably close to another 10 years, Todd and I could see that other businesses were growing by adding other trades like plumbing and HVAC. And we were like, nope, we're going to do it. We're going to specialize in electrical. We're going to change the world and we're going to be different. And so keep in mind, if we started the business in 2000 and we joined Nexstar in 2012, when we joined Nexstar, we were only doing $2.5 million after 12 years. And so thank goodness we found Nexstar, like-minded individuals who liked to learn and teach in a similar manner and had just joyous light. That's what I've loved about Nexstar. And then we quickly just succumbed to the idea that we want to be creative and we want to be different, but yet why do we want to reinvent the wheel? Let's just get on board. And so we added heating and cooling 7 years ago and plumbing 6 years ago. And that's really where our growth came from. So we went from $2.5 million when we joined Nexstar in 2012 to this year, we'll do $26 million.
That's
Nice.
incredible. And I think not everyone, but so many of us have a new construction trauma story.
That's for sure.
The trauma story.
It is a trauma. It's a trauma bond.
It is
It's hard to break that. You got to break it.
Because I think, especially if you were like someone in the field previously to starting your business, in our case as our husbands, that's how you knew you guaranteed work. And that was kind of like the drug of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like keep the drug because
one day you'll get paid.
One day you'll get paid. One day this will happen. And then what I love, we were still doing some new construction up until a year ago at our company. And Nexstar was like, and Nexstar does have new construction companies, absolutely, that do a great job, but they kind of, it's either one or the other kind of, you've got to either be just new construction or just residential. And for us, a lot of our growth came when we started recognizing like, yes, you have to like stick with one. And I think you hit the nail on the head by saying, just like all other contractors, we made the mistake of thinking we should do it all. And you can't do it all.
Our sign from the universe was filing 3 liens in 1 week, the same week that we received that postcard in the mail. And we were like, we've got to do something different because this is not working for us.
Yeah.
I remember looking back because we started out in new construction plumbing, and I think we did that for about 3 years, and we were so excited. I mean, I had a baby on my hip, and it was the worst possible time to start a business, but we did. And looking back now, the financial part was hard because, you pay everyone else before you get paid because you got to pay your people and you got to pay parts. But it was almost the bondage that the builders had over Brent emotionally and the way they would talk to him. And it was really just owning a job. It was not owning a business. Mm-hmm. And the emotional toll that took on him.
Yeah. And it's hard as a spouse in that spot too, of how to support. That's such a journey. It's a journey.
It's a traumatic journey. And then you go, and then people start calling you because they can't flush their toilet and they're excited to see you. They're excited to pay you. They'll go leave you a 5-star review. It was just a totally different, of course, there's different obstacles now, but it's just a completely different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
So, Leslie and I get this question all the time, and I can only imagine how you could possibly relate to this question, especially, 23 years in the business, a goal of 26 million this year, it's you and your husband. So how is that? What advice do you have for the ladies of working with your spouse?
Oh gosh. I mean, I would not change any of it for sure. I had to develop a mantra for myself to be brave. And, some years were way harder than others. I grow the business and the business grows me. And I've always had the belief in knowing that a business can only be as successful as its owner's mental limitations. And so as much as it was for us to show up and run the business every day, we had a bigger responsibility to raise our mental limitations through lots of reading, life coaches, business coaches, and to utilize everything that Nexstar had to offer, because the more that we could raise our mental limitations, we knew that would create space for the business to grow.
That is amazing.
I had to write
feel
that down. I
speechless.
grow the business and the business grows me. I think one of the things that's really hard and of working with your spouse, and I try to say this, is like we are all guilty of expecting ourselves out of other people. And then more so when you work with your spouse, 24/7, essentially, you come home to them, or in my case, my office is like smashed right next to my husband's, and we are two different people. And sometimes, Leslie and I have definitely talked about this before of like, well, I said this or I've said, well, I asked him this and the reaction wasn't what I was expecting, because our burdens aren't always our husband's burdens. They are, but they don't like understand. No, I don't want to say understand them. They don't carry the burdens the same. That's just the difference in a male and a female, right? Like,
well, and we all see things through the filter of life that we've had. So Brent's experience is completely different than mine and what he sees. Like in the way he relates to people, and we all have different attachments. So you can trigger a decade-old wound on someone, and on the other person, it's nothing, know? But that's how it becomes so dicey in a working marriage relationship, because whatever you're dealing with in your marriage, you're dealing with in your business, and there's more people involved.
Yeah. Do you know what book really helped Todd and I understand each other and to really honor each other's strengths? Have you guys read Traction? By Gino Wickman? You have the visionary and then there's the integrator. And that really put into words for me and Todd what our differences were. And gosh, we probably just read that book 7 or 8 years ago. And so as soon as we read that book, it was like, gosh, I don't need him to respond or be in the business like me, and same for him. And then we came to learn that. And of course, Todd and I did seek some business counseling. It was like a relationship. Our coach was Dave, and we went to a retreat, just Todd and me and this coach. And he said, there's a return on investment in your business, whether you know it or not, depending on how well you're getting along or not getting along. It's showing up. And so we have sought counseling and books to help us work through that. And so Todd is the visionary. Todd is the numbers person. And I've been the human connection leadership from the inside out, and treat people with heart and develop those around me. And we just have a really healthy respect now that we have very different skills. We can do each other's. I mean, I can't do what Todd does quite as well as he does. And I think he'd say the same thing about me. But if we read finance books because we want to get better and be better in finances and investments, that's what you study, right? And Todd and I had come to realize that if we want to have a better marriage and a better business partnership and a better relationship, we ought to seek books and behave in a manner and learn in a manner together so that we can show up in the business united with the same vision, so that there can be a good return on investment in the business.
That's so good, because you're right. Whether you like it or not, your business is a direct reflection of your relationship if you're married to the other owner, So you have to constantly be intentional about that.
I feel like I've become a better leader through my years of becoming a better co-owner with my husband. So if that makes sense, like I can lead better because I'm more connected there and understanding. If I was more like trying to do my own thing and him trying to do his own thing, then we were just constantly fighting up against each other. And then it would be like, well, he told me to do this and you told me to do this. And like, if there's no communication there, then your team sees that, and then they don't trust that. They don't trust anything. Like if they're telling me two different things, like, is my paycheck going to be right? And you have to be one cohesive unit, but understand that you both have different strengths and weaknesses for sure.
Yeah. And I think as a woman in this business, I think it would be probably in any business that I would have worked in, and I'm only going to speak to myself, but maybe someone can relate to this. But for me, I have interpreted how I show love is by doing things for everyone around me. And so it has just recently, within the last year, come to my attention that, Elaine, what if you're jumping in, being the safety net, trying to be all things to everyone and be the safety net for everyone, that I rob other people of their own life experiences and their own leadership lessons.
That's
Wow.
really good. I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
That honestly takes me back to at church here recently. Our pastor was talking about tithing, and that's a hard any church, when they start talking about tithing, it's like kind of like what's happening. And our pastor was talking about how they needed a certain amount of money because they had building repairs and these things coming up. And one of the members of the congregation came in and said, what if I wrote a check right now for that amount? And, taking tithing back biblically, our pastor was like, I wouldn't rob that from our congregation of being able to give faithfully and get what in return. And you just writing the check, I was still doing this campaign, because that's what that is. But church is still essentially a business, right? And I'm not going to take that away, but I take that right back to what you just said. Leslie and I are both like,
I don't know what to say. I'm just examining everything I've ever done in my life right now, because I like to take action, but I also love people and like to do things for people. And I'm a giver and I'm a problem solver. And for me, that's probably because of some wound I've had, right? So although it's out of good intention, maybe it came out of a bad place and it was a coping skill for me. And so I am just like blown away by you saying that.
Well, and
I'm just examining. So forgive me. I don't even know what to talk about right now.
No. Well, it's true.
I want you to say it again. I need to write it all down. I'll have to go back and listen.
If I were a visual that I've been teaching some of our young leaders here, now that I've been able to identify it myself, now I can coach it. And so if we think about a maestro, right, he's standing up at the orchestra. What I've done my entire life is give me your instruments, Todd, and, give me the drums, give me the trumpet, give me the saxophone, give me the violin. And I was taking people's instrument, and can the maestro possibly play all of the instruments? No. My job is to stand up here and be graceful and gracious, treat people with heart and human connection, and help them fine tune their skill and get the performance out of them that we want without me taking their instrument from them. And even up until a year ago, I've been taking everybody's instrument, jumping in, thinking I was helping. But like Leslie mentioned, it was some sort of trauma where I learned this behavior. And it wasn't coming from a bad place, but it wasn't allowing other people to grow.
Mm-hmm. So what happened a year ago that got you to this revelation about yourself? Like, how did you get there? Because there's an element of doing all of those things that you're doing that feels good. It feels good to us. It feels good. We're helping, right? We're so smart. Here's our solution. You just go do it. How did you get to that point?
I had two things. One, I have a dear friend who owns a business. He and his wife run a business, and he very specifically sat me down and said, I see you in my wife, and I want you to consider this. And so I was like, isn't that interesting? But then I read a quote. I don't have it specifically, but the quote a few weeks later basically said, when we're early in our individual leadership journeys, it's about what can I do for other people and how much can I do myself? And as we progress through leadership, it becomes about how do we coach other people? And that really was my aha moment, that 22, 23 years I've been running around seeing how much can Elaine do And I really had to step back and say, okay, it's time for me to start coaching and allowing other people to rise to the occasion, because I'm keeping them from their own life lessons and their own leadership lessons.
Uncle Joe, the sales trainer, Uncle Joe Crosara, I was on a call with him one time and he said, stop picking up other people's crayons. And I use that all the time. And I told you, or I've taught you to do this, and I had to go do it myself. And our call center manager, I was talking to her one time about, there was a number, we needed some outbounding calls, is that time of year we're outbounding. And she was sending out her hourly updates of how many each person had outbounded. And then she was on the list. And then all of a sudden she had lapped everybody, and she had done 80 calls. And I know that there was a little bit of it in there saying showing hey, I can do it. Look, I'm proving to you that what I'm asking is capable. But I, went back and was but whose crayon are you picking up? Because whose responsibility is it? Because what you should be doing is listening to the calls to then coach the conversation to then, get more value out of the call. And so I love that analogy too, of just I'm going to remember this. What did you say? Maestro, the orchestra? Is that the maestro? I was what is that? Because we're all so guilty. And I think anyone who is ambitious in our personal businesses, because especially if you're the owner, you're it's even more than ambition. You're dude, we got to have some money too.
Well, right. There's an end
game
every day that has to be hit. And
and
you bear the responsibility every night when you go to bed.
Yeah. And if I don't have the money or the thing, so that's when we start picking up crayons, or we start taking instruments away, or we start, not even that we don't have the money, but it's oh, we didn't hit revenue today and we can't do that 3 days in a row. And so you start pulling these tools back instead of flipping them around and saying, fix the training. Your instrument's squeaky. Maybe your instrument's just squeaky and it needs to be tuned up a little bit.
And I think too, the power of me being in the business. So I call it hard. I did a study during my MBA, and it was a whole semester on hard power versus soft power. So hard power would be, I call it only about numbers in business. Here's your numbers. Why don't you do this? You should be doing this, and only measuring that. And I think that women in the business bring a balance. I think could be more power in the softer power of the feminine woman who appreciates, recognizes, takes time to listen, and has conversations and demonstrates to the team and everyone around us about heart and human connection, which true leadership is from the inside out. And then we incentivize the behaviors that we want to see and do it in a more positive manner. And I think that's what our culture is about at Mainstream. And that's the power of having a woman in the trades.
What are some unique ways you incentivize your staff for leadership and the things that you were talking about?
Oh, gosh. I don't think it's anything super creative. For Google reviews, we're hey, we'll give you $25 in cash on Friday, so you have some spending money over the weekend. At Christmas, the narrative was, we really do want to help you have more money in your pocket. We'll pay you $50 per Google and Better Business Bureau review. If we're looking for sales, instead of coming down and beating people up for not selling, we'll throw out a $250 spiff for a tankless, or it's giving a little bit extra. And the mindset could be, well, that should be their job and they should be doing it anyway. But if we just make it a little bit fun, even for gift cards, everybody really seems to rally around that.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that you and your husband went through the book Traction together a while back, and you figured out where your gifts were, how you were different, how working in those really changed things mentally, and I'm sure revenue-wise for you guys. But is there a time you can think back looking because we know in the beginning as owners, we have so many hats that we have to wear, may not be our gift, may be super stressful, and we're just trying to get it done. Or you didn't want to let that task go for whatever reason, and that you ultimately took it off your plate, delegated it out, or hired someone for it, and saw an amazing return. financially or emotionally?
A good question. I mean, I did not like doing payroll. I knew I could do it well. And we went through a period where we had a couple of staff accountants leave, and I did payroll once on a tour bus through the hills of northern France. And I did payroll once on a flight from London to Seattle. And that is a task I emotionally am grateful not to have to do.
I hear that.
I think it's fair to just know your balance or your limits of like, there are definitely some things that, oh, let me delegate that, you know, and you in the beginning have to do them all, but if you work towards the goal, you can definitely start delegating. But there are things that it's not just like, oh my goodness, payroll, like Amy at my office, girl, shout out, you know, I saw her like sending messages like, guys, you have to clock in and out or I can't pay you. And Kaylee, our marketing assistant, who's salary, so she doesn't have to clock in and out, but she's literally like, why is that so hard? Don't they want to get paid? And I'm like,
why is it so hard?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. And then going back to and that's so funny because Amy said, your dispatcher shouldn't have to edit your time, AKA quit making her pick up your crayons. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I think you have to, as owners, we have to recognize our strengths and our weaknesses. And if there is something like payroll that you just like, I can't do it. I can't. And in my ADHD brain, there are things that, have you ever had the task or thing? And this happens with our business coach with Nick Sir. Sometimes it's like, he'll give me something to do and I put it off until like an hour before the call because I just knew that it was like too stressful. Mm-hmm. And then when I actually did it, it took 3 minutes.
It wasn't that big of a deal.
And it was like,
then you felt like a weight had been lifted.
Yes. Why did we do that to ourselves? Why do we do that? That's so funny. That I think that you are amazing, Elaine. I've really enjoyed just chatting with you about the things of just real business. I think you're an inspiration to women who are out here wanting to be on that 23 years. Mm-hmm. You know, like I said, in 9 years,
it's possible.
It is possible. And in 9 years, I feel like I have lived, you know, I'm not even in cat lives anymore. I'm just in like 12 lives. I don't know. Like there's so many emotions that have happened and the things that have happened, but it is possible to get to that other side. And I think you said something earlier of, I wish I knew then that it was all going to be okay.
I have had the mindset just because, you know, there's a lot of responsibility being a mom and the school stuff and, you know, the home and then the business. And so a couple things, I had to shift my vocabulary. I'm going to do this or that. And once I changed my verbiage from or to and it was like, and I'm going to be a board of directors and I'm going to do this and that, my life became very full and enriching. Because I wasn't solely focused on what I didn't have or what I wasn't getting. Switching the word to and allowed me to see all the blessings of what I get to do or have or earn. And that's been really huge.
Did you, have you read Fierce Conversations?
Yes.
Yes. I love it. I'm in that right now. And one of the things that like I'm in the beginning of the book of just changing, quit saying but that's one of the things she says is, hey, I need you to do this, but I'll let you do this or whatever, like quit saying but and just like own the conversation. And just since I've changed that word of not saying but as much, it's incredible of like how more impactful my message was in general. Before, because I would start filling it with more crap, you know?
Is that a Brene Brown book?
Not Brene. Who is it?
I can't believe you're reading a book and didn't tell me. We talk about books all the time.
I'm gonna have to pull up
I
Audible.
need to know. But while you're finding that, I want to ask, you mentioned you did a business retreat with just your husband and was it your Next Star coach?
Nope. It was somebody we'd found outside of the industry. His name was Dave Blanchard. I can't really remember what his organization was called, but he worked with couples.
I think that's cool. Okay. But in a business environment.
We actually went to his cabin in southern Idaho. We talked about business, but then we did things like wakeboard and road side by sides while he gave us little lessons over the whole weekend.
That's awesome. It's Susan Scott, Fierce Conversations.
Okay.
That's a really good one. But changing your verbiage is really, it's like, I was talking to one of my kids the other day, and it's so funny because these lessons sometimes that we give our kids, we have to like sometimes circle back and give ourselves. And it's like, if I would only listen to my own advice, but I kept hearing, I can't. And I'm like, you're no longer allowed to say the word can't. Like it is now a rule. Like I can't is not allowed. You are grounded if you say I can't. And he's just like, what? And I'm like, grounded, I've tried everything else. Can't is not. But we are all just as guilty of doing that and not listening. And I remember that was just this week. I walked away like, I need to go back to my Fierce Conversations book, because it is reshaping those words can help a ton.
Yeah. I just want to bring up one more thing. I think it's super important, women in business who, not just with their husbands, but even for themselves, to really ask ourselves the question, why do we do the things that we do? So for example, I shifted my vocabulary to and. I mean, it has worked out in my career. I have an MBA. I've been a school teacher, right? I've been on board of directors. I really have an accomplished career, and I'm so proud and grateful. I had to realize not that long ago that I felt like maybe I was still trying to prove myself, not just to my husband, Todd, but maybe also because I thought I needed to do those things to belong in the trades. And I had to shift from external validation and ask myself why I was doing those things to being internally motivated and loving myself and validating myself and not having the urge to go and steal everybody's instruments, but to be the maestro and really do it from a peaceful place and a loving place.
Because you deserve to be in this space and you don't have to prove that. And I think as women, we all do that because this is a male dominated space. And what are you doing in this? And that's the why behind this entire podcast is exactly that of you don't have to go seek that validation, and you don't have to go seek approval from people that it doesn't matter, just grow yourself. I think one of I love taking notes through these conversations as if I was just listening, and I grow the business and the business grows me. That's the goal.
That needs to be the title.
That's the goal
of the episode.
That's the goal.
I don't know anywhere else or anything else I could have been doing to have the personal development that I've had working in this business with my husband. Yeah. And I want to leave you with a quote I heard just a couple weeks ago. We all say as women, okay, I got to go fill my cup and get a massage, or, whether it's a facial or go have a girls' weekend and all of those things. And I call it self-care your face off. I'm learning that I need a lot of self-care to come here fully present in my heart as myself so I can have inside out leadership. And the quote was, when I do those things, what's in my cup is for me, and what's overflowing is for others.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because we don't, there's so much here, Elaine. There's so much.
I need a Kleenex.
Because we don't, that's what we do as women. We don't ever allow ourselves to fill our own cup. As soon as we get a drink in there, we're giving it to someone else. Our kids, our spouse, our business, our friends, or whatever. And that is sometimes the difference between men and women. And I don't last night, my husband was in the garage playing cornhole. He loves cornhole and he's really good at it. And he really is. And I was thinking, and he sent me a message because I was kind of looking for him. And he sent me a message like, hey, I'm out here. And he's out there by himself, but he was filling his cup because that's what he needed. He needed to be by himself and he needed to play cornhole. And he knew that. And I just thought to myself, he's way more disciplined than I am because I won't recognize that and I won't do that. And then, but we get guilty as wives sometimes.
And then then you deal with the consequence of it.
Yeah. Or you say, well, all you were doing was out there in the garage playing cornhole, and I was in here worrying about life and love and the pursuit of happiness, and you're robbing his drink.
Do you even care how much I've been overthinking everything for the whole family?
Yeah. And
in the business.
and he's sitting there like, I'm going to be better tomorrow because I just reset. And I think we can all take a lesson from that for sure. There's so much wisdom. I hope, do you go to super meeting normally? I hope to catch you this year. We'll have to. We're going to come for sure. I love super meeting. Leslie struggles with meetings.
I struggle with sitting down all day long for multiple days in a row. I don't know how else to say it. It is hard for me.
I'm always like, stay seated, ma'am. Stay seated. But to me, it's just being in a room, and why I love Nextstar so much is being in a room with people who are like-minded and wanting to grow. And it doesn't really matter if you do 26 million or 10 or 2, you're there for the same thing, wanting to grow, and you all have something to learn. And then getting to meet, like, I know without a shadow of a doubt that, Elaine, I would have never known who you were had it not been for Nextstar. And now I'm so excited that people are going to get to hear from you and what an amazing business that you've built. And that's the networking. That's the good stuff. That's why those groups are so good. You know, whether it's Nextstar or anywhere else, I always say if Nextstar's booked in your area, find you a best practice group where you can find a community, get in a peer group, get in something, and just talk to those people that are living the same life as you.
Then the magic is in the network for sure.
Yeah, that's what it is for sure. Well, thank you again so much for being with us today. And
we want to have you back on. So
yeah, I
just
definitely
think you have a lot of wisdom to share, and not just about business, but the emotional part. And that's what's really resonated with me. And I know it's really going to resonate with our listeners too.
Thanks for having me. I super appreciate it. And congratulations on your podcast. So awesome.
Thank you
so much.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, ladies.
This has been Power Women of the Trades. Like what you hear so far? Leave us a review at Apple, and make sure to listen to our other episodes wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.